Welcome to the Grinders Table, the podcast where we sit with C-suite executives and founders who are taking their industry by storm to figure out how you can build an exceptional career and business. Together, we'll try to uncover how they are both defying the odds and what you can learn from their experience. Today's guest discovered a $281 billion problem while working as a pharma executive across Africa and Asia. He watched global pharma companies lose millions to expired inventory because they simply didn't understand Africa or have African data. But instead of accepting this as how things should work, he decided to build something that would change not just how African healthcare is evolving, but how global drug discovery has to evolve to meet African needs. 8 years later, he's building one of the largest African datasets to help big pharma drive commercial success and overcome the unique challenges of solving African problems. Today, our guest is Ayodeji Alaran. Let's DJ introduce himself by himself rather than that long intro. But Ayodeji, who are you? When you hear that question, what comes to mind?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Owen, for the opportunity to be here. Who is Ayodeji? Ayodeji is the last of 7 children. Many people don't know that. Last of 7 children, trained as a pharmacist some 18 years ago at the University of Lagos. Always had interest in global big pharma. Just always attracted, even after my high school. Went to the University of Lagos, still with the mindset of having a global career. I've always wanted to see the world from a multi-country, multicultural perspective. So after I was done from University of Lagos, did my internship first with GSK. Interestingly, I had other offers that were going to pay me like 100,000 naira monthly back then, but I settled for GSK that was paying 20,000 naira. Everybody felt I was crazy, but for me, I wanted to start my life, by learning from a global organization because I've always had a global dream. So did my internship with GSK, then went on to work with Pfizer, AstraZeneca, then had some roles across Africa and Asia with GSK later on. Then pivoted into big data, into medical device. So I didn't only do pharma, I also went into medical device, worked partly with Johnson and Johnson, supporting with setting up the distributor team in Nigeria. So orthopedics. Also did some things with Medtronic, a company called Medtronic. They do pacemaking or pacemaker for the heart. Another company called Convatec. They do more of urine bags and all of those things. So that's my journey too. So started with pharma, moved to medical device, and then from there eventually went into big data and AI, working with IQVIA in London as a business development director for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So I would describe myself as an outlier. I don't like to follow the crowd. I like to think differently. I like to challenge status quo, and I like to get feedback and learn. So I'm still learning. I'm still reading my environment. And I don't believe there's anything like failure. It's just what didn't work and how to make it work. Yeah. So that's why.
Let's take several steps back to your days during pharmacy training in Lagos. Did you ever think that your career will evolve to this? Was this something that you had dreamt about or thought you were going to do in the future?
Yeah. So this may sound strange, right, or funny, right? I wrote down in my yearbook, final year, 500 level, what I wanted to be, and I wrote CEO there. I was clear that I wanted to be a CEO and run my own business. In fact, before I gained admission to university after secondary school, crazy. I had this small book where I wrote the group of companies that I wanted to have. I don't know where I found that from or learned that from. I don't know. Right. So I've always kind of been clear that I would like to be a CEO. I like to run my own thing. But obviously, I didn't have visibility into if it's going to be data, if it's going to be AI. I mean, it was really far back then. But I knew two things. One is I wanted to have a global career or whatever I'm doing, I wanted to be global. Then second is I wanted to be a CEO. Just those two.
You made a very important decision quite early on. You had to forego a certain salary, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
100,000 at that time, good money.
Yes, it was.
How do you make a decision where you have to weigh the opportunity cost? Do you have some sort of formula for that?
So I think what I always try to do is I try to think 30, 40 years. When I make plans quite early, even as a young man, I like to think multi-year ahead. Then I look at those around me and I look at them and see those that have their present, whose present looks like my future. And how did they get there, right?
Hmm, interesting.
Fortunately for me, GSK, when I got my internship, my director then, who was also in the audience just last week when I got the award, PBR being the solutions provider company in Nigeria, she started with pharma multinational very early, and it was clear that this is the path that I have to take, right? If I'm going to have this global experience, and if I'm going to also have that unique knowledge that many don't have. Another point is people being conscious of the environment and connecting that to the future. And I'll give you an example. When I got the role with GSK, incidentally, I wasn't brought in as an intern in GSK. I was brought in to act in the place of a manager that was going on the maternity leave. A lot of people in the company didn't know. Up to today, they didn't know that I wasn't a manager. I was an intern, right? And as an intern, I had to write processes for GSK, Nigeria, Ghana, and Kenya. I had to manage technology transfer from Egypt to Nigeria to the factory in Agbara. I had to write quality management SOPs, things that typical interns don't do. When those things started happening, I knew that this was an opportunity of a lifetime. Money can't buy this. So that consciousness of your immediate, like being present now and not losing that opportunity that is presenting itself to you is really critical. A lot of people, you know, worry about the future, but they don't notice the present, even what's sitting around in terms of the opportunity. So for me, it was clear that I'm never going to get this thing elsewhere. 60,000 naira difference can't compare with what the trajectory that I get from learning in this place that I am.
That's quite fascinating. So, in all regards, from your time at GSK, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, across
Yeah,
Africa and Asia,
yeah,
you were well successful in the corporate world. And then you probably hit that dilemma where you said, I need to leave to start something. What was that like? What was that internal battle like?
yeah, yeah. From the onset, all of my jobs were training school. I knew that, right? I wasn't really planning to be global CEO of GSK. I wasn't. So I took every job with the mindset of I'm learning. This is cool. This is cool. This is cool. This is learning. And I knew that a day would come where a demand will be placed, on these things that I'm learning. But I think that point came to your question around that switch. That switch came from crisis. One of my mentors said, "I don't let that crisis go to waste." So I found myself in GSK. Then I was marketing manager for Africa and Asia, and we had a new CEO who didn't really accept or wanted to continue with our strategy that we had in Africa and Asia, and therefore my role was no longer needed. Right, I was redundant. But the company decided that they were going to give me an opportunity in Ghana to be head of marketing in Ghana, and I resigned. I said no. Right, I'm not taking this. And my wife was also jobless, and she was even pregnant. you know, so everybody in the world like you're crazy. They called me from GSK house in London, but I knew that that time had come to go solve a problem that I was always passionate about at that time. And that was the question around data. Why? Because, and I suppose we'll still talk about this later, I felt kind of indebted to the future. And what I mean by that is I felt like, we've always talked about this no data, there's no data, there's no data. Then who's going to solve it? Who's going to have to deal with it, right? Our children would come and our grandchildren say, "What were you guys doing?" So I decided, no, that I'm not taking any other, job, even though it was a promotion and all of that, literally an expatriate life. I said, I'm not taking it. So I resigned, and I started PBR from my house. But what was clear in my mind was how big this was going to be, right? I didn't have the details. I didn't even know what AI was. But I just knew that, I really want to build a global company. I want to build a company that people would really want to work for, and I have to figure my way out as I go. And since my wife believed in my crazy idea, all I needed was just one more person to believe.
Talk about having a really solid partner. Or your while I mean, people can paint a picture that you had some sort of hockey stick career, right? You started here and you were just
Yeah.
rising up. I'm sure within that there were all sorts of, indecision, turbulence, and the likes. How did you manage all that, pressure from work, pressure from, figuring out what the future will look like, pressure from your own demands on yourself with having a relationship?
I'm an incurable optimist, right? I just believe that there's solution to every problem. Every problem. The reason why it's the problem is because there's a solution, right? I also believe that there are seasons. Whatever you're going through now is not here to stay. And I'll give you an example. My first job post NYSC, I was offered a role actually by GSK 3 months to the end of my NYSC. I was introduced to them and I turned it down, right? Because it didn't look like really what I wanted to do at the time. So I went to another company, and the company decided to post me to Enugu. I'd never been to the East in my life, and I had to be based in Enugu as a medical sales rep. That was with Pfizer. But I just took it, right? I have a risk. I have a very high risk appetite and tolerance as well. Not blindly, right? I always try to what people don't an average person doesn't want to do is what I want to do. Right. So I was posted to anyone. I'm like, okay, let's go do this. What can happen? They're humans too. So I always try to I'm open to new things. I think those are the things that help me. I'm open to new things. I believe that I would always figure it out. I just need a bit of time, right? I will always figure it out. Then I also rely a lot on my faith, right? And community, the right people around me. I've kept a group of friends for the last 20, 25 years, all of whom also have very spectacular trajectory that I also share my mind with, you know. But it's just the fundamental philosophy, which I still hold to today. At one, there is no problem that doesn't have a solution. There is none. It doesn't exist. So if I find myself in any crisis, like you said, it's not all rosy. It's in fact, when I got my job with Pfizer, I didn't have a car for 8 months. I used to board buses to go and sell. Then I got a car, a new Ford Focus, new, brand new, tear over, and I bashed it in 1 week. Write off, I did complete write off, and I came out of the car on scratch, and I was still okay. So it's just believing that people really we overestimate problem, we overemphasize, we accord problem too much than it actually is. That's my mindset.
Yeah, talking about relationships and your friends, one of the
Yeah,
things that I've heard people say is, you're a sum total of people around you, right?
yeah, yeah,
And and sometimes with, high potential people that have big dreams, they can get very competitive.
yeah.
Do you think that great relationships should be competitive? And how do you manage competition within, your peers and your friends?
Do I think they should be competitive? No, I don't think they should, but I think they should be challenging, right? Great relationships should compel you, should challenge you. You should feel uncomfortable not achieving in that community, even though there is no competition. In other words, you should feel like that relationship is placing more demand on you to become more. And I'll give you an example. I've got like 5 constant friends from secondary school. It doesn't mean I don't have other friends. So in case other people are listening to this, please, you are still my friend. So I've got 5 friends, right? And I can mention them. All the 5 of them, none of them was in my secondary school, right? But we just used to meet like after school and everything. One of them went on to be the highest GP ever in the history of 4.96, right? He got a scholarship to study abroad, also had a distinction, and now he works in oil and gas consulting around the world. The second guy, right, is a consultant O&G practitioner in the UK. The third guy is a consultant pathologist. The fourth guy is an investment manager in Dubai, right? Some stellar career. So, and they were my first angels, actually, even in PBR, right? So We always just kind of challenge each other. We share information. We help one another. But it's nothing like competition there, right? But it's just the fact that you cannot be mediocre around them, right? Because they challenge you. So I think it's a case of selection. You being comfortable with having people that are seemingly better than you around you, not choosing to be the most intelligent person in the room all the time, right? Being comfortable with that there's somebody smarter than me around me. And if I listen to them, I could become a better person, right? All of those guys are literally kind of smarter than me. They are. But I'm comfortable with it because they make me complete as a person and by learning from them as well.
So many lessons to learn from that. And let's talk about AI. The world is agog with different versions of LLMs coming out every day, agents, all sorts of creative ways people are beginning to use AI for good and for the bad. But in the African context, we would say that adoption has been quite slow because of, would I say, the availability and the quality of data, because most models are trained for the Western world. For you, how has that been building PBR? That ideology of, should you build something in terms of building the data infrastructure, or do you adapt whatever exists across the world? I mean, how did you look at solving that problem?
So I think in solving the problem, two principles are vital, right? Or maybe three. One is that we cannot play an isolationist mentality in innovation in Africa, right? So there's nothing like we have to do our own and the West have to do its own. It's never going to work, right? We can leapfrog better when we are humble to accept, you know, that they have things that work, which therefore means that for even PBR, and we look at best cases around the world, how AI is being used. Obviously, like part of my advantage as well is because I also deployed some AI solutions in healthcare and genomics and all of that in my last role in London before I'm pivoting full time into PBR as an entrepreneur. First is that we need to learn from the world, right? And that's what we do at PBR to see what is working and what are best cases around, and how do we adapt to that. Second is that we must think sustainability, right? So at PBR, we look at the solutions that are most sustainable. And by sustainability, we mean something that, can have some form of balance between what goes out and what comes in, or the cost of making that innovation happen. Any AI solution, any AI approach that in the medium long term cannot sustain itself, either by we capturing value because of someone that uses it, because we're a business, right? We're not a charity. We're really very careful with it. The last but not the least is impact. Impact is critical. Are there solutions that if we leverage existing infrastructure, we can make impact now instead of later, then we consider it, right? Are there solutions also that if we leverage them, we have opportunity for sustainability, and at the same time, we can maintain competitiveness and differentiation, then we also use it. In very simple terms, right? There are certain solutions in terms of AI that doesn't even exist. So for those of us who don't have options, for example, AIs that we can use to standardize our own kind of data on certain particular brands of products that are existing in Africa, that doesn't exist. So we have to build that from scratch. But other things that would help us to be sustainable, right, in terms of cost, reduce or shorten go to market, or test hypotheses, on that we are not proud at all. We're very humble. We copy shamelessly, right? But there has to be some clear differentiation and competitiveness in using that solution such that we are not just a me too. I think what really sets us apart is on the depth and the size and uniqueness of the data we have, and also the expertise of our people, their medical knowledge, local knowledge, global exposure, and technical skills.
It's interesting that you expect that big farmers are supposed to be very data driven. Yet there are so much inefficiencies with how they,
Yeah.
produce drugs for the market and distribute drugs. What was that when you experienced that, when you were still there? What was that feeling like, and how do you think, beyond the PBR Insight being a solution, how do you think that companies can navigate this data problem?
So I think interestingly, it's not a necessarily a global farmer thing. I think it's more a regional thing actually, right? So a lot of global companies are already kind of making the necessary adjustments, even though, as you would expect, because it's a highly regulated environment in terms of compliance. Testing out new technologies is always a thing that makes a lot of CEOs really very careful, right? Where you have the FDAs here or EMA in Europe that are regulating this space. So we live kind of in markets or in an industry where there's so many compliance requirements. So companies are always very careful of new technology innovation. However, when you come to emerging markets, right, there is a difference. That difference is the fact that most of the available technologies and solutions are built for the developed world. And therefore, there is a capitalist incentive, right, for those things to be built for the West. What has therefore not happened over the years is innovators in Africa or in developing countries also rising up to provide solutions that is necessary for the continent. And I'll give you an example. I remember back then, even at GSK, everywhere, when you go for global meetings, and every country provides, data about their markets, and it's very embarrassing, really embarrassing for us in Africa when we don't have, enough data to provide. And they're always very stunned in New York, in London, that how can you guys run a business without this, right? So globally speaking, to be fair to big pharma, they're trying really to innovate, to adopt AI, adopt data based within the regulatory guideline. However, in developing countries in Africa, we've not really had enough people standing up to solve this problem of data, to solve this problem of contextualizing technology, our unique need in Africa. And that's where PBR really comes in.
Let's talk about the future. You're
Yeah.
launching about 3 new AI products this year. What does success look like for you?
Great. What does success look like? I think it's a mix of things. One is, you know, critical is building solutions that actually solve problems, right? Problems, solutions, and impact that is measurable. Measurable. For example, helping companies identify new gaps in terms of drugs that patients need and ensuring that those patients also get those medications or patients get medications at the right price or the medications are available in the right quantity. So success for us means that we do something or we have products that people use, companies use that really have real value, right? Real impact, especially one that is measurable. Another very critical for us is people, right? This may look funny or strange, is our people, right? Giving people opportunity to do great work, to be like 200% of that capability. All of what we do at PBR is only possible because we have, the best people. So creating that environment where people are self-driven, where they bring all of their innovation to the table, right? For us, that is success. Again, success can be defined depending on the horizon, right? So I'm talking about the short term now. Then also critically is the commercial part of things, right? Success is critical when we meet our set goals, smart objectives, from revenue to profitability goals to all of those critical metrics that we're measuring. So that's kind of the short term. In terms of the long term, what does success look like? Success looks like PBR being the leading company in emerging market when it comes to big data and AI in life sciences, right? That combined with offering contract research in a measurable form, what that means is that we are supporting at least the top 30% of medicines that make the most difference for people in emerging markets. In other words, we're working with the companies that are making the most effect or supporting the drugs or innovation that is producing the most impact to the largest population in the region. That is what it looks like for us.
One thing you've hammered on here is people, and even and during the times where we've had face-to-face conversations, you've talked about people. How do you index on the right people? How do you assess them and say, this is the kind of person I want to work with, or this is the kind of person I want to do a project with, or this is the kind of person I want to employ?
I think for me, the key formula is precedence. They must be precedence, right? They must be precedence in terms of their decision systems, in terms of their career pattern. And those systems should indicate a number of things. One, it should show that these guys have lived a life of being an outlier, right? Either they've chosen a path that is very different from what their colleagues would have chosen, or they've done projects that most colleagues would not do, right? They kind of have lived in that top 1-2% in terms of their kind of decision system, the kind of history, right? So it's not so much of what they tell me at the interview, no. It's more of I look at your history, where you're coming from, right? How you've navigated the crisis, how your career has stacked, And I'll give you a clear example. Growth and revenue officer resigned her job at Novartis as the head of department and went into health tech, right? Successful career. Then she went into startup and literally started again, right? That is a proof of conviction about something, right? And that is what everybody in the team have in common. At one point, they have to take a decision that reflects their deep conviction about things, which means that they don't think like the general population would think. The second part is the personality fit. Who are you? They hold you as a person, how you talk, how you get your points across, and also thinking how are you going to fit into this system of people that already exist, right? Is there going to be a tension? Would you make people more by joining, or you're going to take from them when you join? Right? I don't really bother so much about the technical parts, right? Are you good at marketing? Are you good at sales? There are not people that I can, see around, but I think it's that history of your life that is a more clearer reflection of how you process things in your mind, and how you make a decision and stand by it. And that's why we're really very blessed to have literally outliers working in PBR, right? So nobody is normal in PBR, like because we don't do normal work. You know what we do, there's no template. I'm serious. There's no template. We have to figure it out.
Interestingly, we've touched on people, which is very essential for building successful companies. We've talked on purpose, which is very, very great, or which is needed when you want to be when you want to be a world changer rather. And then we've talked of product, which is PBR Insights. What advice would you give to young African entrepreneurs who want to build solutions that will compete with their global counterparts from day one?
I think the first one is that your your entrepreneurial life started way before you started entrepreneurship. Everything in your life should have stacked up to when you decide to eventually go into entrepreneurship, which means that if you're starting a business at the age of 20, for example, you must be conscious of what have you learned in 20 years. And if I sit with you to ask you, and you're not conscious of what you've learned, there is a problem. Because a lot of people focus more on the future, what they want to achieve, instead of looking back at what they've learned, right? And that is important. What you've learned in the last couple of years, all your life, from your career to your school to the crisis, would reflect on how successful you're going to be. And at that point, you need to know what you don't know, because what you don't know as an entrepreneur is more of what would kill you than what you know. you know, I have this principle that every time an investor invests in a company, you're investing in your learning process. You know, how quick you're able to learn what works, what doesn't work, that flexibility of learning. So I would advise any person starting, please pause, take a pen and write 20 things you have learned in all your life, right? And look at how relevant they are to this journey you are going on. Two is that be clear on what you don't know, right? Oftentimes we overemphasize our capabilities because it's exactly what you don't know that is going to kill that business. Therefore,
Yep.
that means you have to be humble. You must be willing to learn from everybody, from your gate man to your secretary. They will tell you what is working. PBR has never built a product that we thought of on our own. And that sounds strange. We have never built any product based on idea. We build products based on what we hear, what customers say. And that's why it's very interesting. We are not looking for product market fit. The customers already told us the product that is fit.
Hmm.
Are you getting it?
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
it's not a case where we are building something and saying to customer, no, this is what they want and we're taking it to them. So listen, be humble, calm down, you know.
Yeah. You've all been listening to Ayodeji Alaran, the founder of PBR Insights. We are almost rounding up our conversation, but we're going to go right into our rapid fire round, which is just very simple questions that require very simple answers. And let's go. What's your most contrarian belief about African businesses?
Short-sightedness.
What is one metrics you obsess over that other people ignore?
Growth.
Nice. What's the best piece of advice from your LBS MBA?
You don't know many things.
That's so true and funny at the same time. You can't know everything, and that's a fact. That's a fact. What keeps you up at night?
What I've not figured out.
Okay. And finally, which is a cliche question, but still very relevant, one book you think every African entrepreneur should read?
Hold on. Private capital. Understanding private capital.
That's an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I
thank you
went
so much for
to buy that book.
You did? Okay. What was the top line thing you got from the book?
But the first top line point is that there's nothing like private venture capital. It's private capital.
Yeah. Actually,
It's
you're
people's money.
absolutely correct. It's people's money. You are correct.
It's
Now,
not venture, it's people's money. Yeah.
for every guest, we end with this question, and we always get different types of answers. Between power, money, fame, and pleasure, which one is most important to you? Which one is least important to you, and why? Money, fame, pleasure.
Which one is most important and which one is least? Do I need to explain why after I said it?
You can say why.
With power, I think I can do a lot more good. Yeah, I can do more. Power to do more, right? Least important, pleasure. Did you say pleasure?
Yes, power, money,
Yeah.
fame, and pleasure.
Oh no, the least important is fame. I'm not interested.
I see.
But it happens. Yeah.
Somebody was telling me that sometimes fame is the byproduct of doing really great work. And so if you trace excellence, the probability of fame coming is really high, except you choose not to be in the spotlight.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's a consequence of something.
Yeah. Thank you so much for spending the last 30 plus minutes with us. This was such a great conversation, and we enjoyed listening to all you had to share.
Wow. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much. Always a
This has been the Grinders Table podcast, bringing you unfiltered insights from Africa's most compelling founders and business leaders. If you had found value in today's conversations, here's how you can help us amplify these stories. Take 30 seconds to share this episode with someone in your network who's building, investing, or curious about Africa. You'll be amazed at how many life-changing connections start from a single shared conversation. And if you're feeling generous, a quick rating and review goes a long way. It helps more founders and business leaders discover these powerful insights. Until next week, keep grinding.